Welcome, Ian. Thank you so much for joining me on Crypto Driven today.
Thanks for having me, Lisa.
So awesome. As a quick intro, Ian is the co founder of Syndicate, which is a platform that enables communities to launch and run internet native investment clubs as DAOs. So, really excited to dive into Syndicate and all that means, as well as your new product, which is very exciting. But I just wanted to acknowledge the tremendous progress you've made so far. You started the company with your co founder less than a year ago, launched your first product, investment clubs, about 6 months ago. And in that short amount of time, you've already had over 20,000 investment clubs join the platform with over $20 million in deposits. So that's insane. And congrats on the incredible progress.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we're part of a bigger movement here, and really just grateful for the interest and excitement and support that we've received to date.
Absolutely. Well, great. So I want to let you share more about the second product that you launched just a few weeks ago, and your vision behind it. But first, could you give everyone a little bit of context on where you started with the first product, which is investment clubs? You can start with, what is an investment club and why would a community want to start an investment club on Syndicate?
hmm Yeah, so you already mentioned this, but what we're building at Syndicate is radical infrastructure using Web3 technologies to transform the world of investing. And the way that we approached that was we first built a protocol to basically run investing DAOs. So DAOs for the purpose of co-investing on the internet. And the first application of that protocol that we shipped earlier this year was this application called investment clubs, Web3 investment clubs. And what an investment club is actually investment clubs have existed for at least hundreds, if not thousands of years, where basically small groups of people, way before the internet, obviously, came together, often in like local towns, and bought stuff together. But these investment clubs haven't been modernized for the internet. And it's also very difficult to operate such a thing in like today's internet and today's like fintech set of solutions. So we basically modernize that for the internet and modernize that with Web3 technologies. So now any group of people, whether it's like a friend group of 5 people or it's a larger community of like 100 people across the internet, can form an investment club within a matter of seconds using our tool, run that thing as a Web3 native DAO with no backend. And the speed to create one of these things is literally the time to for a single Ethereum transaction to confirm, which usually takes at most 30 seconds. And the cost of it is 1,000 to 10,000x cheaper. So you can create and run one of these things for just the cost of gas. And then we've also deployed to Polygon, where it's like a fraction of a penny to deploy one of these things, which makes this tool widely accessible to people across the planet. And we're seeing actually most of the demand for investment clubs coming from outside the United States, which is really exciting. So what it just means is, like people can invest together and learn together. So some of the groups that we've seen popping up on investment clubs since we launched 6 months ago, I mean, there's a whole range of things. You've got angel investors that have been, doing stuff together for years. They're now kind of using our tool to, take that to the next level. We see obviously things like venture funds and other kind of institutions running on top of Syndicate. But, some of the more interesting things are like, we have a lot of groups actually from the university ecosystems where they're students or they're alumni, where they're actually just starting to get into investing and they want to learn together. And so it's not really about like the money, the size of capital that they're deploying, or even like, necessarily trying to like make a lot of money or profits or anything, but it's more about the community that's coming together, more about the expertise that they're starting to build and the experiences that they're trying to acquire. And we think that's really exciting because it's bringing more people and more groups into the investing ecosystem.
Yeah, that's super exciting. That was going to be my other question: is are you seeing communities invest together for the first time just because it's so easy on Syndicate? Sounds like that's definitely the case.
Yeah, which is phenomenal. I mean, I can't. I have to check our recent analytics, but at one point, our average investment club size was like a few $100s, which
Wow.
is pretty interesting because people are just they're maybe buying some NFTs together, or they're investing in some tokens out there. Some are going even a step further to buy assets in the real world, whether it's startups or we actually had one that was like trying to buy a car or a house and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, like a lot of groups are coming into investing for the first time. They're very excited and curious to learn. A lot of our users are also coming into Web3 for the first time, which
Mhm.
is exciting, but it also presents a number of challenges. We get a lot of support requests just about like how to use Web3 wallets or multi-signature, like things like Gnosis safes and stuff. So we get a lot of inbound related to that, and we're trying to help them as best we can.
You're starting to talk about just the importance of community, even in communities that come together to invest. And so your second products in collectives is a social networking product. Had that always been kind of a big part of the vision for Syndicate, or was that something you guys pivoted to or shifted to as you
Mhm.
explored more with these clubs?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because my co-founder and I, Will, and we met in 2018 at IDEO's Crypto Lab, and back then, which was there wasn't really much going on in the crypto space, and that was at the bottom of the last crypto winter,
Mm-hmm.
really big one at least. Um, our work back then was actually into decentralized social networks and their applications. And what we learned in 2018 was that, well, we learned two things. One is that investing is actually the primary application for such a technology. And then the second, at least in the near term, and then the second thing is that the ecosystem wasn't ready for that. It was like years kind of uh, too far into the future, in particular because it relied on DeFi infrastructure to exist, which
Mm-hmm.
didn't exist back then really at scale. And so we ended up deciding that the idea was too early. So we ended up doing different things. Like he went into the identity space, actually, digital identity, and then I went into the DeFi space. And it was around 2020 where we looked at the ecosystem and said, wait a minute, like a lot of the stuff that the idea that we were researching now exists, and we can now do this thing. So that's when we created Syndicate in 2021, and and so from the very beginning, based on our research, social networks were always a part of our long-term vision. We just didn't know exactly when it would come in because of we knew that investing. We've always known. I mean, I've been an investor for almost a decade, and we know that investing is not just a financial network, it's also a social network. People, organizations, venture funds, and other kind of entities that coordinate and collaborate to determine how capital and resources are allocated in the world to different projects and startups or ideas and people. And so, in order to revolutionize investing, we knew that we needed to not only re-architect the financial rails of investing, but we also needed to re-architect the social rails of investing. And so we always were going to build that. We didn't exactly know when and
Mm-hmm.
how, but in late 2021, when we were uh, working on the investing protocol and the investment club application with a number of communities in private beta, we kept on hearing from them that actually like these investing DAOs that we were launching with them, they lived within broader communities and broader networks,
Right.
and they had these kind of sub social networks that interacted and existed around the investing DAO, whether it was like in the traditional case, for example, like a network of LPs for a venture fund, or maybe a scout network, or maybe a founder community, or a community of advisors or contributors kind of around the investing DAO. And when we saw that, that was early signal for us that actually like our social networks, a social network vision was playing out kind of around these DAOs, and we needed to build and wanted to build something that actually extended that. So we started working on it actually in late 2021. We started doing research. We started building and shipping this in private beta with, and then ultimately these things ended up releasing into production with communities in Web3 like Rug Radio initially, then BFF, and then FWB, and a whole bunch of others. And we did that for basically a half year. We then tested it, audited it, started basically packaging it to be released more publicly. And then, 2 weeks ago, we launched it publicly, and it's called Collectives, but it's built on a new protocol that we designed called ERC 721M, which builds on top of ERC 721, which is the industry standard for NFTs and has been since 2017 when it first got invented, but it extends it in important ways by making 721 modular.
Mm-hmm.
And the modularity of 721M does a few important things. Number one is it actually transforms it into a developer platform, because you can swap components and modules and plugins in and out of the 721M contract dynamically. The result of that is that it makes the 721M contract as well as the collective evolvable, meaning that it can adapt over time and grow over time with a community or a social network, which is a big kind of critical requirement, as we learned, in working with Rug Radio and BFF and FWB and a number of others, which is that these communities that are on chain and these social networks that are on chain, they're not static. They change over time. They add new members. They, for example, introduce custom roles, identities, reputation systems. They evolve kind of their brand, often through like changing the image that shows up for that network or NFT. Yep. And they're not fixed. So we designed 721M to in this way so that it could evolve with communities over time. And for that reason, it's very powerful for building communities and building social networks and growing and managing them over time. And the last thing I would say is that, if you think about the infrastructure that we've built just so far, we have this investing financial protocol on one side that's powering investment clubs and a range of future applications. And now we have this social networking protocol, 721M, that powers collectives as kind of an application on top of that. And now we have this investing protocol with a social networking protocol. And so we can actually now start to integrate those things, as well as build new things on top of those two pieces of infrastructure that accelerates us to our ultimate long-term vision.
I guess just to take a step back, you've got these two protocols that you're running in parallel that are composable. But if you were to take the user journey of a community manager or a community team that's starting on Syndicate, how do you start? I mean, do you start on the investing side and then come over to collectives? And then once you're in collectives, what do you do in practice?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So actually, just a couple stats, like you mentioned, on the investment club side, since launching a little over 6 months ago, we have, I think at this point, more than 25,000 investment clubs as DAOs running on Syndicate. Collectives, which only launched, I think, less than 2 weeks ago at this point, there are more than 700 collectives that have launched on Ethereum mainnet, and more than 100,000 actually memberships to these social networks, i.e. collectives, have already been created and formed, which is pretty wild. I mean, we didn't think that it would be. I didn't personally think that it would, especially in the bottom of a bear market, right around the ETH merge.
Yes.
That we would see something like that. But yeah, it's really cool. And
Are
And
most of
so,
those were most of those investment club customers, or is it mostly net new?
yeah, what's interesting is that about 5 to 10% of the people who are joining collectives are also members of investing DAOs on Syndicate. But
Okay.
that means that 90 to 95% of them are actually new, which presents to us an amazing opportunity to not only start to integrate these tools and applications, but also to reach kind of new communities. And it relates to your question around the user journey, which is that something that we learned very early on as we were doing this research was that there are many entry points into investing, actually. So some groups they form with the explicit mission to invest together. So they
Hmm.
will come directly into investment clubs or investing DAO and say, hey, we're a group of 10 people or 90 people, and we want to buy NFTs together, or we want to invest in startups together. So they go create a club, they run that, and then oftentimes what we find is that they start realizing that they want to build networks and communities around that DAO. So they
Hmm.
start thinking about, oh, okay, we're going to have like multiple seasons, or we're going to have multiple vintages of investment clubs or funds, right? And so they start thinking, well, we'll have different members or different LPs. Some of them get even more progressive, where they're thinking about, oh, we could create advisor networks, or we could create scout networks around them. So how could we do that on chain, kind of around the DAO? So then they start thinking about this like social network community building primitive, which is starting to lead them to collectives, right? So that was kind of one journey that we often see. The other journey that we see, I would say even more often, and this is what really kind of led to this insight, is that usually communities have a higher order objective than just investing. And as a result of that, they form before kind of making the decision to start deploying capital
Right.
and forming an investment club. So examples of this are like university communities, where their primary objective is actually to learn together and to help educate each other and provide opportunities, whether it's like career opportunities or other things for each other. And investing becomes a mechanism or like a method for supporting that overall objective. So what's interesting is that like they initially form actually as a community with to even like discuss and define that charter. And then from there, they start thinking through the programs, some of which are not investing related, others
Mhm.
of which are. And so a lot of the collectives that we see like are not investing specific. They're actually they have some other objective, whether it's like maybe even like a philanthropic goal or other things. So some of the communities that and networks that have formed on collectives since we've launched, like I'm actually just looking at it right now. Like one of them is a startup in Web3 that wants to build like a network of fans and early supporters.
Oh, cool.
That was actually one of the biggest. They have several thousand people on their collective already. There's one that was actually a podcast that created a network around them of like people that follow Web3 and things like that. Harvard Business School's alumni created one
Oh,
uh,
nice.
for alumni, and now they're starting to talk about like, hey, like they actually use collectives. They use Guild, which is one of the non-syndicate Web3 apps that we
Hmm.
feature as composable with 721, to then token gate a Discord. So now all these HBS alumni are going into a token gated Discord, and some of them are starting to talk about creating sub collectives in different locations around the world, as well as even like creating investment clubs on Syndicate to invest in stuff together, which is
Right.
pretty neat. And then we also have like weird things, like we have or really kind of like out there ones. We have one that's focused on climate change. We have one that's focused on artists, in the NFT space. I just saw one today. We just saw another one today that is focused on people who love Singaporean rice dishes, and they formed a collective to just get those fans together to like talk about their love for those dishes. Really different, so like we're seeing all these like really creative uses for it, beyond investing, and that's perfectly fine. Like, this tool is and primitive is generalizable, and so if people want to create something and then utilize it with some other tool in Web3 that's composable with 721, totally fine. Like that's why we designed it that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, even in that wide ranging list of communities, you can already imagine what the investing use cases would be, whether that's, pulling capital from their community, from their fans, as in the case of that startup, or deploying small amounts of money into, just shared ownership that they want to invest in. So, I mean, I think that's really cool that you've really lowered the bar on, hey, you've got this Web3 native community, but there are a bunch of things that you might not want to spin up an investment club for, right? In real life, that would be just really, really easy now that you're living natively. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
I think the other thing too is that like the way we think about investing in the long term is much broader than just capital.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, investment today typically connotes like people investing money or capital in return for ownership or equity or something like that. But I think like where what we believe is where this is headed ultimately is that commodity capital has been commoditizing for many, many years. I mean, even before Web3 and what Syndicate's doing. What we think crypto is doing is taking that to the logical extreme, where actually investing in the future is not just going to be about capital, but actually about people or about communities and about networks of people and communities, investing time, investing expertise, investing resource, human capital to help important startups, projects, technologies, ideas, people even, succeed and accomplish their mission. And so um, it kind of relates to this general principle that like collectives in 721M. I mean, if you have these communities, let's say that like Singaporean rice lover, community. Don't know who you are, but shout out to you. You are you may not ever consider investing capital for returns, but in the future, you could invest, your time and attention to things that want you to be involved in your support, and
Mm-hmm.
we think that by bringing those communities into this, broad, very extended ecosystem, one day, even if they don't explicitly, choose to create an investing DAO, for example, they may still be able to contribute to this economy and to these efforts, and we think that's really exciting.
So I wanted to ask your general approach, because I think the idea of building an on-chain social network is, first of all, super ambitious, but also can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people. So it sounds like for you guys who started with this kind of memberships, groups concept, which is evolvable and has a bunch more flexibility and is composable. But as you think about human relationships, what that's meant online, what that's meant offline. There are obviously a bunch of other interactions, whether that's conversations or sharing on chain, sharing off chain activity following. So the question is, one, how did you kind of distill that into building blocks? How did you prioritize what you prioritized? And what do you think you want to expand to in the near future that isn't live today?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I could talk about this for many hours in podcasts, but yeah, I mean, I think that for us, our approach to social in Web3 and crypto is based on our foundational research from 2018.
Mhm,
We had just been literally steeping in that, and
mhm,
thinking about that and imagining that for many months, if not more than a year. And what came from that were a number of design principles for what the future of like social networks in Web3 and blockchains would look like. And there's a lot to unpack there, but I think at a like what I can say at like a summary level is that social networks in Web3, in our opinion, will not look like social networks in Web2. They're going to be designed very differently, and they're also going to have fundamentally different interactions that don't exist in Web2 social networks. And it's actually that, like those capabilities, those new to world capabilities and new to world interactions that are enabled uniquely through social networks as smart contracts, that Web3 social, in our opinion, should be designed around. So what does that mean? Like you were mentioning, like, Web2 social kind of looks like follows and likes and comments. It really optimizes for things like distribution, attention,
Yep.
popularity, engagement, things like that. I think that those sort of objectives look very different with Web3 social. I think that, for example, like it's more about the quality and strength of connections than the number. It's more about the value that is actually contributed as opposed to the popularity of something. So I think Web3 introduces this possibility where actually in the future, a 5-person social network or a person with, quote, 5 followers in Web3 or whatever you want to call that, could actually be just as, if not more valuable than someone with 5 million followers or connections. And that is really exciting because at a minimum, it helps balance things out. I mean, like Web2 social does have a place, like popularity and distribution does have they do have a place, but the world doesn't only operate like that, like especially in the in the real world, right? Like the strength of personal connections. I mean, that matters a lot. It just hasn't been codified into software or on the internet, and that's what we think like really one of the long-term big unlocks with Web3 social is. So as a result, a lot of those design principles, I mean, those, but many more, guided kind of how we designed collectives in 721M. For example, it's a factory contract that enables people to deploy, or communities to deploy their own instances of 721M owned by them. And it's not, owned by anyone other than them, not even Syndicate, or we don't even control the protocol. And that is an important design principle because in Web3, social networks will be owned by their users and their communities, not a central company, not even a singular protocol, which is why we built it and extended it from 721, which is the industry standard for NFTs. We could have built, like, for example, a totally net new protocol, but that wouldn't have been immediately composable out the gates like 721M is. So, there's so much more to kind of like unpack there, but I think that that is, I think, what really differentiates 721M and collectives and how we think about it, which is we're thinking about this from first principles and trying to think about this from like a truly Web3 native way. Like if nothing existed at all, like not even Web2, how would you truly construct a Web3 native social network? And that's kind of our guiding approach to, everything that we've done, but also everything that we are working on and going to do in the future. So to comment on your second question, what becomes really interesting now is two major things. Like one is how can we continue to build around collectives in 721M? How can actually like even the external Web3 and developer community start to build on top of 721M, either modules or integrations, which is completely possible. The second major thrust, obviously, is we've always envisioned and planned that the combination of those two things now unlock new opportunities. And so both at a protocol as well as an application level. And so things that we are currently and have been working on are things that uniquely combine social networking protocol, the social networking protocol that is collectives and 721M with the investing protocol that powers investment clubs today. And we have a bunch of ideas as to like some really revolutionary applications that cannot exist in today's world without those two things, and certainly without both.
And those new kind of Web3 native social interactions that don't exist yet, do you view Syndicate's role as helping to define that, and maybe that becomes a feature of collectives, or how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the learnings and insights from our 2018 work was that in Web3 social networks, what you do is more important than what you say. Building on that principle, we can design we have designed the 721M and collective protocol to be able to account for things like that. Now, we have certain things that we either based on user feedback believe or know is are things that those communities or many communities likely want, and so we're going to ship those things. We also know from working closely with our private beta groups, we already have a number of, in particular, reputation-related modules
Yep.
that we've already built for 721M, and we have a number of those modules ready to go for different communities, and more that are being built. But as we also start to open source 721M, we're already kind of inviting developers to start to build on us, and we already have a number that already are. What's exciting is that we're building the way we've built the protocol architecture is that at some at some point, hopefully soon, anyone can build custom things for their or other communities, and we want to be able to make that available as easy as possible to any network. So the idea is, like, if someone wants to start a new community or a social network on collectives in 721M, they can go and create it, but then they would also be able to see what other communities have built for their communities or others, like, a custom reputation system, a custom identity system, a custom whatever, and snap that into their own contract, maybe even over time and dynamically, so that they can just out of the box kind of get going and on a customization that someone else has already built.
I was gonna say, in that view, the fact that people are already using collectives with other applications, whether that's voting or what have you, that are inherently social, having that data to pull into for a reputation protocol makes a ton of sense. You're kind of establishing the building blocks already.
Yeah, people are already using collectives with Snapshot, with
Right.
tools like Guild, with Gatekeeper from FWBB, which is for online and real life events, and it's really interesting. I mean, and these are not syndicate tools, right? Like they're using investing DAOs and investment clubs too, but I mean they're using a lot of other things beyond what we're building, which is great.
Yep. So a couple things I've been thinking about, kind of on call it the other side of the coin from all the benefits of building open source, building composably, is one, defensibility, and two, value capture. So, given that people can, first of all, totally own their ERC 721M, customize it, how do you keep them on the Syndicate platform? Is it important for you to keep them on the Syndicate platform over time?
I mean, I think we have a few principles around that in general. I mean, on the investing club side and the investing protocol, it is a free protocol. It's like completely free. You have to pay for gas to interact with Ethereum and the smart contract, but like there's no fee
You're not
in it.
taking a cut.
Yeah. And the important thing there is that, like, our mission is to democratize investing at scale. And so we want this thing, that was why, for example, deploying to Polygon and in the future other L1s and L2s was really important, because when you reduce the cost of that down to a fraction of a penny, you can now reach communities and geographies and locations and people that, you know, couldn't afford these tools. And so it's really important that we like live by those principles and values. And that extends to like the social networking side too. So collectives is the same way. Like, it's super gas optimized. There's also no fee in it.
Mm-hmm.
And we want people to, be able to freely use our technology. Now, like the way we think about, I guess, as you said, like defensibility and value capture is that the the best path to that is actually just by creating value.
Mm-hmm.
So we're focused on creating value, and what that means is that, um, by effectively making the underlying protocols for creating investing DAOs as well as these social networks completely free, um, the work for us to do is to create value on top of that. Now anyone can create a social network on chain and a community on chain using collectives. And so we're going to have to now provide and create either additional tools, infrastructure, or applications that add value to those communities that have been created. Because to be honest, like if we try to monetize, let's say, the collectives protocol or something, I mean, that's not tenable long term. I mean, that tool and that protocols, will be and should be commoditized and
Mm-hmm.
freely available. So we're just accelerating that in our view. Like, we're just accelerating what we know we have to do long term anyway, which is create true value, and for these groups and communities above that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, you know, we're trying to be very like long term minded in that regard, and we're not, fortunately we have support and enough resources to be able to take the long view, because otherwise, yeah, like if we were being forced to monetize or try to capture value too quickly, like it might cause us to make decisions that optimize for short term, but actually sub-optimize for long term, and most importantly, sub-optimize for users.
Yeah, completely. And clearly, your philosophy and approach is resonating with the community. I mean, growing amid a bear market, people obviously finding a lot of value entering the space for the first time. So, yeah, kudos to you. Well, Ian, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really appreciate you sharing, obviously a bit more about what you're building and your vision for the future. So thank you so much. And we'll be really excited to see what you come out with next.
Thanks, Lisa. Really appreciate it.